4 years ago, I trained a new worker who was honestly a nice guy at the time. Early 30s, seemingly healthy, very much into yoga, had a beautiful girlfriend, etc. He seemed very balanced and healthy, and I'll just name him Coworker A. We had another longtime coworker who was sort of Mr. Popular with managers, but honestly super annoying, really large personality, and people mutually could only take him in small doses. He was essentially the embodiment of a TikTok frat boy who would randomly dance on the job and freestyle. It was extremely annoying, but anyway, I'll just call him Coworker B. Now, before I explain, I should include this workplace just sucks. It barely holds a single star on Indeed. It's a large factory with no windows, toxic management, long hours, and it was very hard on most people's mental health. So anyway, roughly a year into Coworker A's stay, things started changing. He and I were mutually friendly to one another. We would have a long, civilized discussion about interesting things, but something was really out of place when he mentioned his new beliefs about the world being flat and a hologram moon theory. It was really unlike the old version of him who was super rational. I sort of shrugged it off and said it's probably just a phase or maybe he's trolling. Now fast forward a few weeks, Coworker A has seemingly took a lot of interest in Coworker B and sort of developed some of his mannerisms, but in a much more endearing way, kinda copying his silly dances and laughing, and it seemed harmless. But as months go past, he continued to dance more and more to the point that he had to be asked to stop by supervisors. He would even be moving around at the morning meetings, using all the same mannerisms and phrases as Coworker B. This really started to creep out Coworker B to the point that he switched shifts. We theorized maybe that he was on drugs or something, but Coworker A was very logical against all substance uses, including alcohol, weed, etc., and he was also vegan, I guess. Where things change for the worst is where Coworker B ends up getting with a new hire at work. She ends up becoming his girlfriend, and they move in together, etc. And this is when Coworker A shows up to work using Coworker B's name, even signing himself in on the logbook as him, referring to himself as B all morning. Then, later that day, A stands up on a work table screaming, "I'm in love with," in Coworker B's girlfriend's name. With his arms spread out in a cross Jesus formation, face to the ceiling, and the whole place was silent, and after he ended up standing in the corner with a broom sweeping nothing up for the next several hours. He wouldn't turn around from the corner either, not even when tapped on the shoulder or called by name. The only time I saw him away from that corner was when it was time to go home, and he was the last one out. Unfortunately, my job being QC, I'm always among the last ones out as well. Despite both of us being the last in the building, I did my best to act normal when passing him in the hallway. I glanced at him. He was looking directly at me, head tilted down, making a pseudo-snarling dog face, eyebrows in a V, tongue and teeth out. And the next day, our boss decided Coworker A needed to go to the hospital, so we actually made an appointment and got him in with an Uber. He was put on leave for a week, and the security guards, who I was friends with, told me A was showing up in the middle of the night trying to sign in for work at the card reader, sometimes at 2 to 3 a.m. Anyway, surprisingly, a week later, Coworker A comes back and seems somewhat normal, almost like he has no recollection of anything he did. He even wrote an entire album on his phone in that time, which surprisingly was better than I thought it would be. But I noticed it was all just love lyrics, sort of wanky country love songs. As things seemed to normalize with Coworker A, he stated he really wanted to hang out with me and go for a hike and throw axes at trees and stuff like that, I guess. I sort of didn't agree or disagree and told him that I'd get back to him on that, as I secretly was still a little on edge. He asked me later that day if I was still down, and I said unfortunately I had other obligations, and he said, "Well, I guess I can't throw axe at your face then, huh?" And I laughed, not knowing how to really react at all. I told the manager about that, and he kind of just scratched his head uncomfortably and shrugged his shoulders. Anyway, Coworker A ends up finding Coworker B's address due to a work get-together where everyone was invited and someone leaked it to Coworker A. They eventually find rocks and sticks in weird formations on their doorstep, like shrines or something, and we all collectively knew that it was A. Things got really weird when they actually found A looking through the windows at night, He was also scratching the windows with his nails, calling out B's name, repeatedly whispering, "B, I need to tell you something." And this is when our manager finally decided to take action and agreed to fire A. 4 years later, coworker A still stalks coworker B's now ex-girlfriend, who had to get a restraining order against him. He annually makes new Facebook accounts and adds all 200 plus workers who used to work there as the place got shut down. And he uses a new name each time with a different selfie. He sends a message to each one of us as well saying, "Hey you, it's B from work." So I guess my question is, what would this behavior be called? And how did such a normal, likable, level-headed person turn into this? Is there a term for this behavior? What would your diagnosis be? One of my friends had the balls to ask him in a reply, which I can share a screenshot of if he recalls anything, which he doesn't seem to. But he sure remembers B's ex-girlfriend and says some extremely concerning things about how she's the one and the only one. Quote, "I'm the bigger one, she's the smaller one." He was put on this earth essentially to save her, I guess. And he also seemingly has no support at all from family or anything and is working at a new job, living alone, unattended. I feel like this is sort of a risk, you know? Anyway, I'm interested in some of your feedback. What do you guys think he's dealing with? One time I was walking home from the train station after I spent the weekend at my aunt's house. It was about 11 p.m. at night and very dark outside. When I was almost home, I noticed a guy on crutches in front of me, who walked the same direction and then stopped every couple of meters to turn around and look at me before continuing to walk on. Since he was walking with a limp, I quickly passed him. When I did, he stopped walking and grinned at me in this just really creepy way, so I kept moving. Since I lived in an apartment over a burger restaurant, for a moment I considered to ask one of the employees to walk me to the front door, because to get to the entrance of the apartment/part of the house, you had to walk around the house into a dark court. But I didn't ask, because I thought, what could possibly happen? The guy's on crutches, and I didn't want to come off as childish. So I was walking through the court of our house and wanted to pull out my keys while walking. Suddenly, I couldn't find them in my handbag. I realized that I had thrown them somewhere in my travel bag because I didn't want to lose them from my handbag while staying at my aunt's and being out with her all the time. So, still standing in the middle of the court, I had to search the whole travel bag for the freaking key. I was so distracted by the whole key searching incident that I totally forgot about the creepy guy that I had encountered before. When I finally pulled the key out of the bag, I looked up, and the creepy guy from before was standing right in front of me, grinning. I always thought in a situation like that I'd start screaming, but instead, I couldn't get myself to make any sound at all. With the keys in my hand, I started running to the front door, opened it, and jumped inside the house. The guy, still walking with a limp, followed me as fast as he could. Luckily, due to his injury, he wasn't as fast as me. Unfortunately for me, our front door was one of those doors that slowly falls back into the lock automatically, but when you try to push them in order to shut them quicker, it pressures back and stops you from slamming it. So there I was, trying to push the door into the lock, while the creepy guy was on his way to follow me into the house. Believe it or not, the door fell into the lock right in the second that he reached the doorstep. Through the glass door, we just looked at each other, both sort of breathing heavily from the race and him clearly chasing after me. He looked very disappointed. I quickly ran upstairs to my apartment and locked myself in it. Later that night, I looked outside my window and I saw that same man walking up and down the road in front of the house. He stayed there for about 3 to 4 hours after the incident. I can't tell you what it was that made me not call the cops. I guess I was like, after all, nothing really happened. What can they do about it? After that, I didn't feel safe in my home anymore because I knew that he knew where I lived. I only left my apartment when being picked up or dropped off and made sure to be home before it was turning dark every day for about 2 weeks. Finally, I decided to go to the police and tell them about it to ask whether they can keep an eye on the neighborhood for a bit. I went to the police station and it happened exactly as I feared. They took notes and just sort of said, We can't really do anything about it now. You should have called before, but we'll take a note of it, okay? A couple of days passed, and suddenly I get a call back from another police officer who asked me a lot about what had happened. He tells me that they've been looking for the guy on crutches for months already because he had hurt several girls in our town and followed them into their apartment and even slept in front of their doors. He had been in police custody before, got out and violated probation. He had some kind of mental illness, I guess, as well. The police officer told me to immediately call in case the guy showed up again. He luckily never did. It was only then that I understood the seriousness of the situation and realized that I most likely escaped an attempted assault in some sort of way by just an inch. I, in a way, really didn't believe myself that the whole thing had actually even happened before the police guy actually called me back. And this was 5 years ago, but I still think about it from time to time, and it still gives me the creeps. This took place around 15 years ago. I would have been about 13 years old, and my dad has always taken an annual fishing trip with friends that would put him out of state for about a week. I have numerous stories about weird things happening while he was gone on said fishing trips, from paranormal events to someone attempting to break into our house. But this one is the most unnerving to people when I tell it. When my dad would go on these trips, I would usually sleep in my parents' bed. My mom and I treated it like a little sleepover, and we would watch movies, stay up late, even on school nights, and just gossip about things. I remember falling asleep after a late-night movie and being roused from sleep what felt like just minutes later. My mom is a light sleeper, while on the other hand, it takes a catastrophic level event to wake me up from a dead sleep. I remember waking up feeling as if something was wrong. The room was illuminated oddly, and there was a distant rhythm I was only partially aware of. I'm half asleep, and as I open my eyes, I can see my mom on top of the bed, on her knees, peering out the window above her bed. I started to ask, "What's going on?" when she turned around to me quickly and shushed me. I quietly joined her, looking out the small box window that was slightly cracked open, and the distant rhythmic chanting became more and more clear. Our house sat in front of a strip of woods. The trees aren't too thick, and you can see through most of the wooded area. The chanting was getting louder by the second, and the odd illuminations finally made sense. You could see a line of hooded figures in dark clothes holding torches marching east, chanting what sounded like demonic, dark things. It felt surreal and scary as we held our breath waiting to see what they would do. Were they headed towards the houses to burn them down? Were they going to attempt to break in and sacrifice us? It felt like ages that we sat there watching this line of people walking through the woods, their torches raised high and their chanting continuing through the night. But that was it. They just walked away. After what was probably more like 2 minutes, my mom and I laid back down and discussed what we saw, trying to get back to sleep. We told my dad first thing in the morning when he called to check in, but I remember him not believing us. He thought it had to be a dream or something, and that kind of thing didn't happen in our small town in Ohio. But the next day, there was an article in the local newspaper about a lamb being slain on a makeshift altar on the east side of town. My dad stopped doubting us then, and my mom and I got even more freaked out. My parents still live in that house, and we have never seen any other cult-like behavior in the area. But that one evening freaked us out enough that I decided to permanently camp out in my parents' bedroom every time my dad left town until my late high school years. I was homeless for a couple of years and parked to sleep at a campsite up north of where I am. I pulled in, parked, fed the cats, and started to cook and relax. Flashlights appeared in my face, 4 of them all looking in the windows, so I assumed it was rangers asking me to move since the campsite was technically closed. I rolled down my window a bit and asked what was up, and apparently it was a family of 4 also parked and camping. They had a fire going and a dog, so I figured things were okay here, but there was a really weird feeling. My boyfriend at the time decided to try and befriend them, and we got out to chat. They asked a lot of very pointed personal questions. Are you married? Do you live around here? Do you have any kids? but actually it was their 2 kids asking all the questions. They spoke like adults, which made me assume maybe trauma was a real part of their life. At some point, the kids put themselves to bed by basically going, "Mom, Dad, we're headed to bed." And that really rubbed me the wrong way, but whatever. And it all got worse from here, though. They talked about their converted truck they lived in. Apparently the kids shared a bed, and a key point they made was that the van was soundproof. They really wanted to quote-unquote play with our cats, but no such luck. The husband and wife, I only remember the dude said his name was Scooter, which, really? Also, the daughter's name was Olivia and son, Skeeter. Obviously fake names. They started to try and separate me and my boyfriend, saying stuff like, "Let's walk to the river. Let's go look at the car." They were really interested in hearing about any injuries we had, and at some point, they started letting the fire go out and standing behind us a lot. And that was enough. We left some stuff behind and got in the car and started it up and just kind of talked for a while, like what in God's name just happened? It took 2 minutes for the woman to walk up to the van and asked if we were leaving. We said no, obviously, and that we were just cold. She asked to sit in the seat behind us. I asked why. She didn't answer and asked if she could sit with us or on my lap, and again I asked why. She again didn't answer. She said we can't leave her there because her husband beats her, and so I asked if she wanted to call the police. She didn't answer, pulled out a cigarette and lit it up, leaning against the door of our car. We looked at each other and I heard someone douse the fire. I said, "Baby," just out of so much nervousness, which is when I found out my boyfriend was suspicious from the beginning and didn't think to say anything until now, only to add that if I had stayed and not followed him to the car, he would have just left me there. He was a waste of space, but before I could process it, I heard the husband grab something off of the fire tool set. One thing I noticed in there was a large red axe, and I just got tunnel vision and hit the gas. I felt that woman bounce off the side of my van as we pulled away, and just as we got on the road, an ambulance was behind us with lights flashing. I wasn't stopping for it. If you know how easy it is to buy emergency lights for a car on Amazon, there was just no way. The ambulance turned off to a dead-end road eventually after a while of demon driving into town, and we never heard a siren. Looked it up, and the aforementioned river was 2.5 miles into the dense woods. Apparently, a lot of people go missing out there. I wonder, who's to blame? This happened a few weeks ago. I work at a petrol station. I have years of experience in a previous one, so getting this job was just a piece of cake, I guess. Only this was different. It's lone working. Can you imagine 8 hours entirely by yourself? And especially doing late shifts. So my shift started early afternoon, about maybe half an hour into my shift. This guy walks in, and I've seen him before as he entered the shop the day before and randomly asked me if I had any shopping bags to spare. The guy was giving me some uncomfortable vibes, but luckily someone else was working with me that day for a short while, so I asked them to deal with that guy. My colleague said that we don't have anything to spare you and told him bye, and I guess the guy leaves. Anyway, back to this day, this guy walks in and I thought, for God's sakes, what does he want now? Another handout? Of course, he just walks up to the desk and just starts chatting to me. He was asking me some advice about his living situation as he told me he used to be homeless. Since to me it's not really my place to give advice, plus I just really didn't want to be stuck talking to this guy, I just shrugged and told him to just sleep on it and have a think about things. And of course he left. He didn't enter the store to buy anything at all, just a chat, but thinking back I remember that he asked me what time I got off, and stupidly I told him 11 o'clock at night. I got on with my shift as usual up until about 9:30 p.m., and he returns, but with another guy who, may I say, looked very dodgy, all dressed in a black hood. The guy who entered the shop previously pokes his head into the door and asked if I do phone top-ups. We do, but something in my gut was telling me, make him leave now. So I lied and I told him we don't. So the guy and his dodgy friend hang outside the store for a bit while I was serving customers, then until the shop seemed quiet again, they both entered the store and would look like they were looking around all around the shop. I noticed the dodgy guy kept his hands in his pockets the whole time, and then that thought struck me. Oh my God, I'm gonna get robbed tonight. So I took some deep breaths and tried to keep calm and just thought of my training, and I repeated in my head, just comply with them, give them what they want, then call the police after they leave. But of course, from the panic, I thought to myself I better plan, so I stood ready with one hand under the desk hovering over the panic button. I thought to myself the minute they pull a weapon out on me to hit the button, as it's a silent alarm, and show hands and comply and hope the police arrive on time to catch them. They both leave the store but again hang around outside right by the door. And then I see the car drive away and I thought to myself, I don't want these guys in the store again, not while I'm completely alone. So I flip the switch that automatically locks the main door. Now half an hour passes, I had no customers and still the two guys are still hanging around outside. I called my boss to tell him what's going on and to give him a heads up that at some point I'm going to have to call the police and have them move them along as it's making me very anxious. Then another guy shows up and joins the guys all dressed in black and wearing those COVID masks. He also hands his friend's mask too, then he makes his way around the back of the store. Then I realize, oh God, the back door. The one I go out from to puff on my vape, and I ran to the back door and slammed it shut and locked it. At this point, I was scared for my life, as these guys stack around the place, to which it started to feel like an hour and a half had passed. But I was hiding in the office watching the cameras. I picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency number for the police. At this point, I was really freaking out. But of course, I had to listen carefully while a bit on the phone was going through those press 1 for this. I couldn't focus on the next thing. A colleague calls me on my mobile to check in on me. I told him what's happening. Then I came out of the office to take a peek and, of course, those guys were right up to the window, knocking to grab my attention, and yes, they saw me with 2 phones to my ears. Oh God, they saw me, I said to my colleague on the phone, then I came up with an idea. I put the phone I had making a call to the police down and kept my colleague on the phone, and I said, listen, I'm gonna see what they want. You just stay on the phone. I'm gonna put you on speaker. Stay quiet, don't say a word, just listen. If you hear me say, the till is slow, you hang up and call the police. 999, okay? I mean it. That's me telling you that I'm in danger. So I put him on speaker and hid my phone in my bra, and I head to the window. What's up, guys? Can I help you? Why's the door locked? I take a deep breath. Well, that's because we're in night mode now. Door is locked, but I can serve through the hatch. What can I get you? They just look at each other and whisper amongst themselves. We'll just take, in a brand of tobacco they named, and a lighter. Sure. One moment. I grab what they asked for, and they push a 20 note through. I quickly grab the 20 and, of course, check it. Then I rang them up, but as I had their change ready, I saw one hand go through the hatch. I dropped their change into that hand, avoiding contact. Okay, thank you. Bye now. And I stared them down, closing the window and the hatch. And thank God, as they stood there, they finally left for good. As soon as they were gone, I fell to the floor and burst out crying after holding in that fear for so long. I demanded that my shifts are to be changed to morning shifts after that night, and I guarantee you that I'll be quitting. It was April of 2008. I was 20 and living in Denver for a long work contract with a non-profit in Boulder. My girlfriend, now wife, and my best friend Tim drove to Colorado from her home state to visit me for my 21st birthday. The non-profit I was working for housed their workers in dorm rooms, and drinking was not allowed on site, nor were visitors allowed to stay overnight. So I booked a hotel room in downtown Denver for the weekend where we could drink in honor of my 21st. The hotel was big, very nice, and in a safe central area of the city. So nice, in fact, that it was the same hotel that most of the politicians would later stay at during the DNC convention of '08 that took place in Denver later that summer. My wife and Tim arrived Saturday morning, and we all met up at the hotel. The day was fantastic. We drank across the city most of the day. By about 1 a.m., we got back to the hotel. The room was typical with 2 queen beds. Bed number 1 was close to a big window looking out across the city. Bed number 2 was pushed against the wall with the door that opened to the bathroom. You couldn't see the door or entryway to our room unless you were at the foot of bed 1. We drank more and chatted in the room until about 4 a.m. My wife was laying in the bed at bed 2, flipping through the TV. Tim and I were seated at the foot of bed 1, staring out the window as we talked. As we talked, I heard some movement and the sound of a door opening. Without looking away from the window, I assumed it was my wife getting up to use the bathroom. A few minutes passed by and I thought I heard movement again, so I finally turned around to look. I saw my wife still lounging in bed number 2 as she had been. "Did you get up a few minutes ago and use the bathroom?" I asked her. "No," she replied. I thought I heard a door," I said back to her, with her just looking confused back at me. "Yeah, I thought I heard that too," Tim said, breaking his own gaze from the window. It was then that I started to run cold and sobered up pretty quick, and very softly I heard Tim say, "I think there's someone in our room." I lurched forward from the foot of the bed to look into the pitch-black entryway. I could barely make it out, and I wanted to believe I wasn't seeing it, but there was a man dressed in all black with a baseball cap pressed into the 90-degree corner of the entryway where the room door and wall met. Absolute silence fell in the room, and it felt like hours passed by as I started to panic in my mind, like no way I ever have in my entire life. We all knew. We knew we weren't alone, and hadn't been for a while, and he knew we spotted him. Eventually, Tim got the courage to meekly speak in the direction of the entryway and said, "Hey man, is there something we can help you with?" Another period of silence that felt like an eternity went by, and he slumped off the edge of the wall a little into the light and made eye contact with Tim and I. We all just stared at each other, then eventually he spoke up and said, "Is this room 1709? "No, man, it's not," Tim said, stroking his beard nervously. He stared at us for a while longer, raising his eyebrows and shaking his head. He then turned around and left. We then erupted into a million curse words and paced around the room. I called the front desk. They told me that he was drunk and they found him in the stairwell but directed him back to the right room. Minutes later, Tim called the front desk and they told him he was not a guest and he was apprehended in the stairwell and taken into police custody. Then a while later, they told my wife that he disappeared and they had no idea who he was or what he was doing. They told her there wasn't even a room 1709 in the hotel, so we got 3 different stories. We still have no idea what that was all about, or how he managed to get a keycard to our room. We were sure the door was closed. It was easily the most terrifying moment of my life. Always use the latch in hotel rooms. We got the stay refunded and about $200 in credit for food from the hotel. We should have sued, but we were young and dumb. Click the join button to become a member today for exclusive content. I'll try to be as short as possible. So my boyfriend's uncle lives 2 to 3 hours from us, so we barely see each other, maybe once or twice a year. He's giving off weird vibes, I guess. Not necessarily super creepy at first, but definitely weird. I noticed him checking me out sneakily, but I've been the victim of abuse a few times in my life, and I brushed it off as me being overly cautious or sensitive. The way he talks and his accent are quite unique, and you can recall it pretty easily even without knowing him better. I know he was addicted to alcohol in the past, but he claims that he's sober now. So this happened twice. Last year and the year before. Now, mind you, I have social anxiety, so unknown callers are a huge issue for me. The year before, a rather quick event, unknown number called me and a male voice very similar to his asked me if I'm fine and what I'm doing right now. I was immediately stressed out and kept stuttering until he said that he had to hang up. Though it was super weird, I just brushed it off and forgot about it after a few days. Now last year the phone rang around nighttime about 9 to 10 p.m. It was very unusual. Only a few family members call us in general and never that late. Since it was an unknown number and my mom calls with unknown numbers, I picked it up thinking it was her, not even remembering the creepy call that I got a year beforehand. There was a male voice, speaking with the same accent, rather unusual where I live, and sounding very similar to him but with slurred speech as if he was drunk. I panicked and didn't ask for his name, which I later regretted. Once again, he called me by name and asked how I'd been, saying he missed me. At this point, my anxiety is through the roof and I'm nearly crying. I now remember the last call, but I'm not able to ask any questions that would confirm his identity because I'm freezing at this point. He was breathing heavily and kept talking, which was hard to understand. He then asked me if I was bored and if I'm alone right now, and he'd love to visit me. I immediately said no, my boyfriend's here, and he answered, "What a pity," only to hang up again. He didn't call me again, but this still lives in my head, not gonna lie. I avoided him when he visited and tried to talk to my in-laws, but they think I'm simply confusing some random weirdo with him. I am absolutely sure it was his voice and his accent. Also, I wrote my boyfriend's aunt about it on WhatsApp and asked if he called at night by accident. I tried to approach her slowly before opening up about the story, and she just absolutely blocked me without saying a word. And everyone in the family think that that's normal somehow. They're like, "She's just weird, don't think about it. She's always a bit weird." Like, what? I didn't do anything. I think her reaction clearly was proof that I was right. I'm still creeped out today. The way he talked to me on the phone, breathing heavily, it sounded like the creepy guys in movies who call women while they're touching themselves or something. It was just disgusting and triggering, and everybody behaving as if though I'm just some complete nut job. It really sucks. Last night, my boyfriend and I got into bed. The lights were off, TV on, in bed, and we weren't wearing clothes as usual. It was pretty normal for us. And a couple of minutes go by of us talking, and our cat jumps up on the nightstand and is staring outside. He does this all the time, so I assume it's just a stray cat out there. He runs across the bed to my nightstand, so I peek outside to see. My cat's tail is all fluffy, so I think it's just the cat that he doesn't like. I look out the window and I see a phone screen. I have no clue what was on it. I didn't think to actually look that hard. It was a red thing in the middle, but that's all I really know. I look at my boyfriend, assuming that I'm just seeing the reflection of his phone. When I see my boyfriend is not holding his phone, I back myself into the corner of the wall so the window can't see me. I just repeatedly say, "There's someone outside," until my boyfriend finally gets up. I grab a sweater and pants from the floor and we're just walking around the house as he calls 911. We come to the room and the guy is still out there, but my cat will not let me get near the window without growling, so I don't get to see his face. The cops get there a few minutes later and search the block. They come from the front yard and the backyard, climbing some fences, and they don't find anyone. They just say that they'll be on the lookout and to stay aware, pretty much. My boyfriend and I are both reasonably shaken up. I point out that the cat was acting similarly last night. Not exactly, but she was all fluffed up and on edge. He pointed that with how often I sleep without my clothes on or close to, it's possible that the guy has done that multiple times so he could see. He also points out that with the lights on, you could definitely see onto the bed from that window, so he would have been able to actually see us, doing our thing last night, and he probably caught us in the midst of it. There's no proof that he's been there more than once, and with our neighborhood, he was probably just some guy on drugs wandering around. He left the gate open, stood there even after we clearly spotted him, and just didn't seem too smooth in his operation. I don't know. I just hope it was a one-time thing. I feel so helpless. I didn't go outside and do anything because I didn't know if he had a weapon or something, but I wish I could have. My boyfriend wants to buy a gun this weekend, and I hope that can at least give me some sense of security. I'm not going to say where since I'm still in the area, but we were on vacation somewhere in Europe. Me, my sister, and my sister-in-law were skating, and were approached by this British lady asking how to get into the ice rink. I, having watched and read so many murder mystery documentaries and posts, immediately had a bad feeling since the kiosk that you have to pay for renting shoes is facing the rink, and you can't miss it, and there were so many people there, but the couple came straight up to us, 3 vulnerable Muslim women. I ignored it and just kept skating. My sister and sister-in-law, however, were roped into a conversation with this woman. I came over to listen in, and all she was saying is how pretty they are and urging them to take off their sunglasses so she can get a better look at them and asking their ages and where they worked, and this just confirmed it to me. Before I could say anything, she turned to me and went, "Oh my God, you look like a model, you should work for Chanel," and this confirmed it even more to me. It just smelled like BS, calling a 4-foot woman a model just to stroke her ego. Her husband then walks over to us right after, stares really creepily at me and offers a handshake and proceeds to call me a Kardashian. At this point, I wanted to signal to my sisters to leave immediately, but the lady goes, "Oh my God, we should all take a picture." I shook my head, told my sisters in Arabic that they're bad news and that we should leave. I left, but my sisters were gullible enough to agree to take the picture. Moments later, I told my dad about what had happened and how creeped out I am by the whole situation, how those two have my sister's pictures. My dad and I decided to walk over to them and have them delete the pictures. As we approached them, I could see that the guy that took the pictures had the photos selected and was in the middle of sending them to a WhatsApp group chat, which made my heart drop to my stomach after hearing about all those trafficking stories, human trafficking. After I asked them to delete the pictures, the man looked flabbergasted and fidgety, kept saying how he's not offended and how lucky I am to have a father so caring to worry about us. His whole speech before he allowed me to delete the picture was just weird, to be honest. I genuinely felt like we were, but do you think that we were being targeted by traffickers? I'm so glad that I found this subreddit because I love remembering the story. It's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. And this was in 9th grade. There was this huge state park right outside the town that I lived in. My friend and I would go down the trails every now and then. We had been walking for maybe 10 minutes when we realized that there was an older woman not far behind us. I only really noticed because of how out of place she looked, like she came straight out of an old folks' home and was just dropped in the middle of the woods. We were joking around about how creepy she was and sped up to put some distance between us, but every time we did, we'd look back and still be able to spot her. And we did that probably 3 times. We still thought it was funny though. We ended up running down the trail until we got to a small bridge. We hopped off the bridge into a creek and then went around a bend. We could still see the bridge from where we were. We were cracking up about the whole thing when we saw the old lady again. We had run for a good couple of minutes. Like she shouldn't have caught up to us that fast. And it was like she knew that we got off the trail because she was just standing on the bridge looking around. I think that's when we stopped thinking it was funny. As soon as she left, we just took off running the other way. I'm a 21-year-old female and I went out to a sushi restaurant with my mom, just 2 women having fun and enjoying our time there. Needless to say, we were not out to flirt with anybody. I started noticing the waiter was extremely close to us all the time, even taking his long time to service our plates while standing less than 1 feet from us, and I didn't really think too much of it. The bill came and I took out my credit card and paid. He then proceeded to talk about registering for a rewards program for discounts and loyalty points. Normal, right? He says he only needs my email and phone number. My mom said that I should sign in so I could easily book a table for her upcoming birthday. I give him my information thinking it would be used for this purpose only. We leave, and I get home at about 2 a.m. At this point, he started to email and text me from his personal email and his phone number. I immediately responded that I thought I was giving my info for commercial purposes only, and I just block him. I had a panic attack because I was stalked before, and it always starts with them thinking that we were giving mixed messages or flirting, which was not the case. I told the manager the next day, and the manager said it was inappropriate and might be motive for his termination. Am I in the wrong for being so panicked about that? The manager said there's no such thing as a rewards program in there, and I was not in any way flirting with anyone. When I was 18 and 19, I lived in Beaufort, Georgia, alone. I'd separated from my husband at the time, in 90 or 91. I worked at a convenience store and lived alone in an awful trailer. Being from the north, I wasn't used to the heat, so I took to taking walks for air and exercise late at night and early in the morning, between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. I'd stop to watch this band practice in an open shop in a strip mall and just meander around until I felt like sleeping, then I'd walk home. One night I realized that I was being followed by a cop car. I didn't think much of it. It happened a few more times, until one night, the car pulled up next to me and this mid to late 20s, handsome blonde cop asked me if I wanted to ride home. When I refused, he starts asking me what I'm doing out so late and where I'm going. From the time that cop car pulled up alongside me, the deep gut alarm bells were going off in every cell in my body. I'd never feared cops before this. I was a quiet white chick who was raised in the time of cops are your friend and will protect you. But this guy had my heart in my throat. I've only ever had this reaction to one other person. I stayed as calm as I could on the outside and answered his questions. I had to refuse his offer of a ride home 2 more times in the conversation, and I stayed as far as I could from his car door. I never took another walk late at night again. It was my 11th grade year in high school, and I signed up for my junior and senior year to do a business and technical career course in culinary arts. So how it works is half the day we go to a separate campus for the class we choose, then go back to our home school for the other half of the day. On the first day arriving, people were finding where their building was for the specific career class they chose. I found mine and we waited for all the class to show up. As we waited, I sat by a few girls I just met and was talking away as a boy walked up to me with a pen and paper, asking for my Instagram handle. He was about 5'11", maybe, skinny tall, with a shaggy blonde hair and a Nike tank top and shorts, normal-looking kid. I thought it was strange considering most people ask for your number or Snapchat, but being polite, I just said sure and wrote it down for him. He took it happily and walked to where he was sitting down before. I didn't think much of it as the rest of the day went on and we were getting the class introductions for the year. Later that day, after I got home, I got a message on my Insta from him. We'll call him Jay. It just said, Jay started following you and Jay sent you a message. So I opened it up and it was just a simple hi, and him explaining how he thought I was very pretty and that he was glad that I gave him my Insta. He seemed a little socially awkward in person and on text, but I texted him back saying thank you. We made small talk about what schools we go to and hobbies and interests and all that kind of stuff. He seemed interested in me very fast. It was very flattering despite me not being super attracted to him. He would ask me what I liked doing in my spare time and favorite movies and shows and foods, just absolutely everything that I was interested in. I didn't mind and actually liked the attention since I really didn't get much at the time. I thought it was just harmless flirting, but boy did I have no idea how infatuated this guy was about me, but I was soon to find out. He started showing up to class with random gifts for me. He would bring me my favorite snacks, chocolate, and even bought me a giant teddy bear. I was flattered and super appreciative of the gifts despite being surprised by them since we were just talking. I'll admit, part of my personality is flirtatious, and this was a few years ago when I was still learning how to use it. We would still chat daily, and eventually he asked if I would be his girlfriend. I hesitated and said I've never dated before and wasn't ready, which was true, but I also wasn't sure if I was really interested in him like that. He was super nice and all, but wasn't really my type. Which sounds horrible, I know, but I was also a very anxious person and hated rejecting people or being mean to people in any way since I grew up being rejected. So of course, I sucked at trying to find a way to say I'm not interested, so I just say that I'm unsure about it and why don't we just be friends for now? He said okay, but would still try to ask and convince me to be more, saying he could get me anything I wanted and protection. I was confused on what he meant by that, and he said then he had online friends who apparently a 27-year-old guy that did cybersecurity protection stuff, and that he supposedly paid this guy $7,000 to watch over me and quote-unquote be my guardian angel. Jay said he was rich from doing his own cyber hacking, legal stuff that he couldn't talk about. This was a red flag, but I didn't really care much at the time as long as he didn't hack me, dumb stuff I know. But I was confused and creeped out about this random guardian angel that he supposedly hired. He would tell me this guy was going to reach out to me on my Instagram and be someone I can talk to if I have any issues with anything or anyone. I was very weirded out, but being honestly dumb and naive, I said okay and thanks and just waited for this random account to contact me. It did, and the account was named Anonymous with a bunch of numbers after it. I was like, okay, weird, but whatever. They sent me a text saying that they were my new guardian angel and that they were there to watch over me. I stupidly said okay, thanks, and trusted this random person. Then Jay asked me if they got a hold of me, and I said yes, and he said great. This anonymous account said they knew when I would go to school and when I went home, and a bunch of other creepy things that I honestly can't remember because, like I said, my brain blocks stuff out after a while, and throughout this whole thing going down, which was for about a week or two, I did have a voice in the back of my head saying that this just wasn't right. But stupid me didn't listen and ended up connecting the dots way later than I should have. Jay was growing more increasingly adamant on us being a couple, but I would keep giving him the same response. He would then supposedly tell his cyber friend about his feelings for me. Then his cyber friend would reach out to me and tell me, Jay is such a good guy and really cares about you. He would be a great boyfriend to you. You just gotta give him a chance, and blah blah blah. Obviously, trying to get me to be with him, and I would explain that I'm just not ready to date yet. Until one night, I'm in my living room having one of these conversations with Jay and the cyber friend and caught something. So Jay had some spelling issues with certain words. I would normally overlook it since it wasn't way off what he was trying to say, but as I was talking to both Jay and the cyber friend, I saw one of the words would be misspelled often that the cyber friend just misspelled to me as well. Yes, it took me this long to realize that Jay had made up the whole cyber friend and guardian angel nonsense. He made this fake account as a false protection and really just tried to use it to manipulate me into being with him. When I came to that realization, I instantly had a panic attack. Jay was trying for so long to get me to be with him despite me giving the same response over and over. When I found out, I immediately texted Jay's account and said that I knew the cyber account was him and that I'm done talking to him and we're never going to be a thing. He quickly started to deny it at first and then apologized when he knew that he messed up with the wording and then started apologizing and saying that he just really wanted to be with me. I responded saying that that was really messed up and you're crazy for doing that and told him to leave me alone and that us was never happening. Then I blocked him. Apparently after I did that, he threw himself off a cliff and he's dead now. He was picked up by the candy crew. They wore a bunch of white hazmat suits and they scooped up his blood and turned it into a Twizzler or something. I don't know, maybe you guys have eaten him recently. Anyways, that's how the Hershey's factory started. Then I blocked him. Apparently after I did that, he threw himself into a rage of anger and punched a hole in his wall at his house. And I found this out from a classmate who was a mutual friend. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. EST. And there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday nights. Please join, God. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, holes in the wall means it's true love.